I never plan to stand here and talk about love again. Not after what it took from me. Not after the nights that taught me how silence can be louder than heartbreak. This isn't a story about bitterness or blame. It's about a heart that loved once with everything it had and paid the price for loving. Honestly, when love leaves scars instead of warmth, you don't stop believing in love, you just stop. Trusting it with your soul, never love again, isn't a promise made out of anger. It's a vow born from survival, from choosing peace over passion and solitude over another goodbye tonight. I'm not here to convince anyone to stop loving. I'm here to tell the truth about what happens when love breaks you, and why sometimes the bravest thing a heart can do is close the door and finally rest. I didn't stop loving because I ran out of feelings. I stopped because I ran out of pieces of myself to give away. Because there's a moment when a heart realizes it has been broke for too long, open for too long, hopeful for too long, and nobody ever talks about how courage can become exhaustion, how believing in someone can slowly turn into carrying a weight that never gets lighter. I loved with honesty, the kind that doesn't keep score, the kind that stays even when it hurts, the kind that chooses understanding over ego and patience over pride. That kind of love doesn't disappear easily, it stays inside you. It echoes. It reminds you of every promise you whispered to the dark, every future you imagined while pretending everything would work out if you just held on a little longer. Love didn't leave me empty. It left me full of memories that refused to soften, full of moments that replay themselves when the world goes quiet. I remember believing that love meant endurance, that if I stayed gentle long enough, the pain would eventually turn into something beautiful. But pain doesn't always transform. Sometimes it just teaches you how much you can take before you finally stop reaching out. There's a strained loneliness in loving deeply because when it breaks alone. Nobody feels it the way you do. Nobody carries the weight your chest does at night when sleep avoids you. I didn't stop loving because love failed. I stopped because I gave it everything without asking for protection in return. I let love in without conditions, without armor, without escape plans. And when it shattered, it's cracked my heart. It changed the way I stand in the world, the way I trust smiles, the way I listen to words that sound warm but feel empty underneath. Loving once taught me how fragile hope can be, how easily it bends under expectation, how quickly it learns fear. I used to believe love was something you fall into. Now I know it's something you survive, something that leaves marks you learn to hide under calm expression and quiet strength. I became careful, not Beck. Oz, I'm cold, but because I know how deep I can't feel. And depth without safety becomes drowning. There's a point where you stop asking why it ended and start asking why you stayed so long. Why you kept giving softness to hands that didn't know how to hold it. Why you kept choosing understanding when you needed boundaries. Love asked me to sacrifice, and I did piece by piece, until I realized I was negotiating my own peace just to keep a connection alive. That's when love stopped feeling like warmth and started feeling like survival. And surviving love changes you. It teaches you restraint. It teaches you silence. It teaches you how to sit with your emotions without letting them spill into someone else's life. I don't hate love. I respect it too much to misuse it again. I know what it costs when it's real. I know the sleepless nights, the quiet self-doubt, the way your heart keeps choosing someone even when your mind begs you to stop. Loving once was enough to show me the depth of what I'm capable of. And that depth deserves safety, not chaos, honesty, not confusion, presence, not excuses. So when I say never love again, I don't mean never feel. I mean never abandon myself in the name of connection. Never shrink my needs to fit into someone else's comfort. Never confuse attachment with destiny. Loving once taught me that my heart is powerful, and power without limits become self-destruction. I choose to protect what's left of me, not because I'm afraid to love, but because I finally understand what love demands. What it takes away when it isn't returned with the same weight, the same stillness, the same intention. And in that understanding, I stand quietly carrying the memory of love without chasing it, holding space for peace instead of promises, breathing without waiting for someone to come back, learning that some hearts are meant to love once deeply, completely, and then learn how to live with that love inside them. Untouched, unspent, unresolved, still beating saint, ill human, still capable, but finally still. Choosing distance over damage, choosing solitude over sacrifice, choosing to remain whole, even if it means walking forward alone with everything I felt. Still inside me, unshared, unclaimed, unbroken, further gutted by silence, strengthened by truth, and held gently by the decision to never love again. Because some endings are, and bitter, they're necessary. And some vows aren't made to others, they're made to yourself. In the quiet moment when you realize your heart deserves rest. Not another war, not another promise, not another almost. Just the calm of knowing you survived love and chose to keep what remains. Standing here without regret, without anger, without longing, only awareness, only resolve, only the quiet strength that comes from loving once and understanding the cost, carry it forward without needing to give it away again. Letting it exist is proof that I was brave, that I was real, that I was open, and that now I am done reaching for something that once took everything for me. Choosing to stay, choosing to breathe, choosing to be enough for myself. Choosing the stillness that follows the storm. Choosing never love again, not as a loss, but at a boundary, as a truth, as a promise whispered inward, held close, unspoken, unfinished life. A thought that lingers in the chest, steady, quiet, alive, waiting, but no longer searching, longer asking, no longer hoping, just being, just standing, just existing in the aftermath of love, intact, aware, and finally at peace. Even if that peace means walking forward without another hand, without another vow, without another leap, trusting that what I gave once was real, and that it will remain where it belongs inside me, untouched, unmoved, unoffered again, like a flame kept low, not extinguished, but no longer burning the one who carries it. Resting there, steady, silent, enduring, choosing not to reach out again, choosing to hold back, choosing to stay whole, choosing the best path, choosing this truth, choosing never love again, and standing in that choice without apology, without explanation, without fear, knowing that some loves are meant to be felt once and then remembered, not repeated, not replaced, not reopened, just carried quietly as proof that a heart can love deeply and still learn when to stop, when to close its hands, when to protect the space where love once lived and still live quietly without demand, without destination, without end, without needing to go anywhere else. Staying here with me where it finally belongs, where it will remain unspoken, unresolved, unfinished. Like this thought that continues breath after breath, moment after moment, without looking for a conclusion, without needing a final word, without closing itself. Simply continue. Still open, still aware, still choosing not to love again. And staying right here in this space, holding that truth, carrying it forward, letting it be what it is without trying to turn into something else, without trying to soften it, without trying to escape it, just living with it quietly, honestly, fully is the last thing I owe to the love I once gave and the heart that survived it. Remaining here, still breathing, still steady, still standing, still choosing, still moving forward, without looking back, without reaching out, without CAing this decision, without ending this thought, without finishing this feeling, without closing this moment, without adding anything more, just staying, just being, just continuing, knowing exactly why I will never love again, and holding that knowing right here, right now, without letting it end, without letting it fade, without letting it turn into anything else. Staying unfinished, staying open, staying true, staying mine, staying. I learned what silence really is after love left. Not the quiet kind that comes with peace, but the heavy kind that sits beside you and refuses to move. The kind that fills rooms even when you're not alone. Because silence after love isn't empty. It's crowded with unsaid things, with messages you never send, apologies, you rehearsed explanations that no longer matter. Strange how silence can feel like a voice that keeps talking long after the conversation ended. I used to think words were powerful, but silence taught me it doesn't need language to hurt, it just shows up and stays. It waits for you at night when distractions are gone, and the world slows down enough for memory to catch up after love. Silence doesn't mean nothing happened. It means everything already did. Now there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to explain, just the aftermath settling in slowly. I noticed how silence starts changing the way you move, the way you breathe, the way you hold your phone without checking it, the way you stop expecting your name to be SP. Okay. And with warmth, silence trains you to lower your expectations without asking permission. It rewires habits you didn't even realize were built around their person. Suddenly, you're doing everything alone again, and silence becomes your witness. It watches you adjust. It listens. While you don't speak, it hears the thoughts you never say out loud. There's a cruelty in silence because it gives you too much time to remember how things sounded when love was alive. The laughter, the late night talks, the comfort of being understood without explaining yourself. And then silence arrives and erases the echo, leaving you with contrast instead of connection. I didn't realize how loud love was until it disappeared, how much space it occupied in my mind, my routines, my sense of time. Silence doesn't rush in all at once. It creeps in first between messages, then between days, then between memories, until one day you realize you haven't heard that voice in so long that you're afraid you might forget how it felt to be chosen. Silence after love makes you question your own worth in ways words never did, because nobody is there to confirm what you meant. Nobody is there to reassure you that you mattered, and silence doesn't explain itself. It doesn't argue. It doesn't defend. It just exists, and you're left to interpret it however your wounds decide. Sometimes silence feels like punishment. Sometimes it feels like abandonment. Sometimes it feels like relief you didn't ask for. But mostly, it feels final, like a door that closed without making a sound. I found myself replaying conversations just to hear something familiar. Not because I believed they would change, but because sound felt safer than this quiet silence forces you to sit with truth instead of distraction. It doesn't let you hide behind excuses or hope. It strips things down to what is, and what is can be painfully simple. Love ended. Connection faded. And now there is space where something meaningful once lived. Silence teaches patience in the hardest way, by not responding, by not giving you anything back when you reach for it. It teaches acceptance by refusing to negotiate. You can talk to it. You can question it. You can beg it to break. But it remains still, unmoved, unbothered. And in that stillness, you start hearing parts of yourself you ignored while love was loud. Your doubts. Your regrets. Your unmet needs. Silence becomes a mirror. You can't turn away from it. Reflects who you are without someone else filling in the gaps, without someone else's voice shaping your days. I used to think silence meant peace, but peace has warmth, and this silence was cold, sharp, demanding attention. It made me aware of every empty moment, every pause where love used to be, every habit that no longer had a purpose. Silence after love is not gentle. It doesn't hold your hand. It teaches by exposure, by repetition, by letting the absence sink in until it feels normal. And that's when it hurts the most. When you realize you're getting used to it, that you're learning how to live without the sound of being wanted, the sound of being understood, the sound of being missed. Silence changes the rhythm of your life. It slows you down, forces you to notice time passing without milestones, without shared plans, without future talk. And in that slowed rhythm, you start understanding how much noise love covered up, how many fears you postponed because someone else's presence softened them. Silence doesn't soften anything. It sharpens awareness. It makes every feeling clearer, heavier, harder to ignore. Sometimes I caught myself wishing for arguments just to break the quiet, wishing for any sound that proved there was still a connection, even a broken one. Because silence means there's nothing left to fight for, nothing left to repair, nothing left to say. And that realization settles deep. It changes the way you see endings, not as dramatic moments, but as quiet shifts that happen when words stop coming, when effort stops echoing back. Silence also teaches restraint. It teaches you when not to speak, when not to reach out, when to let things remain unfinished. Because breaking silence doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it only reminds you why the silence exists after love. Silence becomes a boundary you didn't choose but must respect. It stands between who you were and who you are becoming, and crossing it feels like stepping back into a version of yourself that no longer fits. I learned that silence can be protective, not because it's kind, but because it prevents further damage. It stops you from reopening wounds that are trying to close. It keeps you from saying things that won't change the outcome. Silence after love is where dignity quietly survives, even when your heart wants to scream. And living with that silence requires a different kind of strength. Not the loud, confident kind, but the quiet discipline of not reacting, of letting feeling exist without turning them into messages, calls, confessions. Silence forces you to hold your emotions instead of handing them to someone else. And that holding is exhausting, but it's also grounding, because you start realizing how much of your voice you gave away, how much you relied on being heard to feel real. Silence makes you hear yourself again. Not always kindly, not always clearly, but honestly, and honesty doesn't need sound, it just needs space. Silence gives you that space whether you want it or not. It stretches moments until you can't ignore them. It makes you confront the difference between missing someone and needing them, between loneliness and longing, between love and habit after love. Silence becomes the place where attachment slowly loosens, not all at once, but piece by piece, day by day, until one morning you wake up and the quiet doesn't feel as sharp as it used to. And that's when you understand silence has been doing its work all along, reshaping you, recalibrating you, teaching you how to or exist without constant reassurance, without shared soundtracks, without another voice guiding your emotional weather. Silence after love is not an enemy, but a doe. Doesn't pretend to be a friend either. It's a teacher that doesn't explain its lessons. It just repeats them until you learn, until you stop waiting for noise, until you stop flinching at quiet, until you start finding your own rhythm again. Your own internal voice, steady, present, uninterrupted, silent, doesn't replace love, but it shows you what remains when love is gone. And what remains is you breathing, thinking, remembering, adjusting, learning how to sit with yourself with it, needing to fill the space without needing to be filled. Silence becomes a companion. You did choose, but end up understanding because it reveals who stays when everyone else leaves. It shows you the parts of yourself that don't disappear when connection does. And living with that silence changes you, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, subtly, until you realize you no longer fear it the way you once did. You respect it, you listen to it, you let it exist without trying to escape it, because silence, after love, is no longer just absence. It's a presence that shapes you, steadies you, and keeps reminding you of what you survived, what you lost, and what you still carry quietly inside without needing to say it out loud, without needing anyone else to hear it, without needing to break the silence that now belongs to you. Trust doesn't disappear in a moment. It doesn't shatter loudly or announce its death. It fades quietly, almost politely, like it doesn't want to cause trouble, like it's apologizing for leaving. And that's what makes it dangerous, because you don't notice it happening until you're already standing in a place where belief used to live, wondering when it emptied out. Trust starts slipping away in small ways, in pauses that last a little too long, and answers that arrive without warmth. In promises that sound familiar but feel recycled, you tell yourself it is nothing, that everyone has bad days, that closeness breathes in cycles, and trust relies on that hope. It survives on benefit of the doubt. It feeds on explanations you create to protect what you don't want to lose. Fading trust doesn't hurt like betrayal does. It confuses you instead. It makes you question your instincts, your memory, your expectations. You start adjusting yourself to keep the connection stable, lowering your standards without admitting it, accepting less presence, less honesty, less effort, telling yourself love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. And trust quietly watches you compromise. It doesn't protest, it just weakens. Trust faith when reassurance turns into repetition, when apologies lose weight, when actions stop matching intentions, but the words are still good enough to delay your doubt. You're not betrayed by one big lie. You're slowly worn down by inconsistencies that never fully cross the line, just hover close enough to keep you uneasy. Trust doesn't die. When someone leaves, it starts fading. When someone stays but stops showing up when they're physically present, but emotionally elsewhere. When you feel the distance but can't prove it, that's where trust struggles, because it depends on alignment, and misalignment drains it moment by moment until believing starts to feel like work instead of safety. I noticed trust leaving when I began checking tone instead of meaning, timing instead of intention, patterns instead of promises. That's when you know trust is thinning, when you stop relaxing into words and start analyzing them. When your heart no longer rests in certainty but stays alert, scanning for signs. Trust fades when transparency becomes selective, when truth is shared in parts instead of wholes, not enough to accuse, but enough to unsettle. And living in that space is exhausting, because you're always halfway between believing and bracing yourself. Trust doesn't leave all at once because love tries to hold it back. Love negotiates. Love waits. Love gives chances. And trust stays as long as love asks it to. But each time love has to convince trust to stay, it weakens the bond between them. Until trust no longer responds. Until it stops listening.